本周四，美国新任财政部长贝森特接受了 Bloomberg 的专访。本次专访是为时30分钟的直播，是对贝森特专业能力和公众沟通能力的一个重大考验。在这次专访中，贝森特阐述了特朗普政府的经济策略，包括削减开支、降低能源的价格、减少政府监管以及永久性的减税计划等等。此外，他还花了很大的篇幅来讨论了和中国的贸易关系，包括关税和芬太尼的问题以及中国经济失衡和人民币汇率的问题。另外，他还评论了对俄罗斯的制裁、乌克兰的局势以及和欧洲在国防开支上的分歧等。在介绍本期视频的具体内容之前，我们有必要去了解一下相关的经济背景。我们都知道，各国的财政部都是各国政府的钱袋子，他们的政策导向对各国的宏观经济会产生巨大的影响。那具体到美国的财政政策和财政部的情况，我们需要了解的是，美国财政部的财政年度是从每年的10月份开始的，到来年的9月底结束。所以2024年财政年度就是从2023年10月开始到2024年9月30日结束。在2024年的全年，美国的 GDP 是29万亿美金，其中政府的支出超过了6万7500亿美金，占 GDP 的比例为23%。2024年，美国政府的赤字超过了1.83万亿美元，赤字率超过了6%。而美国政府目前的债务总额为36.22万亿美金，是 GDP 的125%左右。那美国政府每年支付的债务利息已经超过了美国的军费支出。从这些数据我们可以看出，美国政府和财政部手中是有强大的经济权力的，而这个权力的政策导向的变动将对美国整个社会和全球的地缘政治产生巨大的影响。好的，那我们来看这一段采访吧。在第一段中，贝森特回顾了他早年的职业经历，并介绍了本届财政部和耶伦领导下的财政部的政策差异。一个是国债发行的久期不同，另外一个就是政策对通胀的作用不同。他介绍了耶伦领导下的财政部倾向于将发行的国债短期化，而他治下的财政部则不会缩短国债的久期。这句话背后的潜台词是什么？是非常有意思的。其实他是在批评耶伦的国债发行短期化，因为大家知道，此前的美国的国债的利率和市场的利率是严重倒挂的，短期的利率超过了长期的利率，所以如果政府的债务发行短期化的话，其实是增加了政府的利息负担和债务负担的。所以 Benson 这么说的话，其实是在批评耶伦的领导下的财政部的不专业。当然他没有直接说，他是通过潜台词的方式说出来的。而对于特朗普的这个政策，他认为是可以降低通胀的，在这一点上他和特朗普保持了口径上的一致，是传声筒。但在主持人问到他为什么特朗普的政策可以将通胀降下来，并且这些政策什么时候能发挥作用的时候呢， Benson 就讲到了这是一个中期的策略效果，潜台词就是说大家短期就不要等着，不要着急了，要等等看。那主持人又问，那中期到底是什么时候，多长的一个时间区间呢？ Besant 又没有办法给出一个具体的时间，就开始批判拜登政府的政策，认为拜登政府的需求冲击是通货膨胀的根本原因，并认为这个通货膨胀这个东西它是有一个严格的路径依赖的。那这个路径依赖，也就是因为拜登政府的大量的需求所造成的这个通货膨胀，到底什么时候会被特朗普的去通胀政策给打败，而价格回到正常的水平呢？其实 Besant 是回避了的，所以这是一个很微妙的一个回答。我们来看一下第一段视频。
The 79th Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent. Secretary Bessent, it's good to see you, sir.
John, it's good to see you.
A warm congratulations from all of us to you. Quite an arrival from, what was it, Little River, South Carolina?
Yes, it's an American success story, only in America.
To the office of Alexander Hamilton with some unique experience. How is that going to help you, sir, approach some of the challenges in this economy?
Well, Jonathan, the way I look at it, for my career for 35 years, I've been sort of sitting outside the room with my ear up against the door or trying to look over the transom, trying to figure out what policymakers should do or going to do and how that would affect the markets. Now I'm inside the room trying to figure out what everybody outside the room expects us to do, how the market's going to react. And what the economic and market implications are short term, but more importantly, medium term, and how that's going to affect the underlying economy.
We've got a lot to discuss, so let's start with the debt market. What people expected you to do maybe was change some of the issuance for Treasury. Something that you'd said back last summer about then Secretary Yellen was that Yellen had taken control of monetary policy through Treasury issuance. Then you're basically maintaining her plans. Can you help explain that? Help us understand where you're coming from.
Sure. So the previous administration shortened some of the duration, and we haven't shortened it further. We've just kept the policy in place. And I believe over the medium term, it's going to play out as it becomes clear that everything that President Trump's administration is doing will be disinflationary. We're going to bring down energy costs. We're going to bring down regulation. What Doge is doing in terms of cost cutting. And I think once the Tax Cuts and Job Act is made permanent, then we can have a revenue increase, cost decrease, and as you said, as the nation's top bond salesman, I got a pretty good story.
So what's the medium term? Help me understand that. What is the medium term? And then once you see all those things, let's say those ambitions become reality, then do you start to think about terming out the debt?
Sure, but that's a long way off. And we're going to see what the market wants. As Lisa noted this morning, and it's fun to see someone who believes that Fed minutes are exciting. The Fed said that they may stop their balance sheet runoff. So, easier for me to extend duration when I'm not competing with another big seller.
So when do you think that time would be? End of the year or further down into the administration's term?
Yeah, it's going to be path dependent. We're still seeing sort of the residual Biden inflation that's still coming through, and I think as the market starts to realize what we're doing and inflation starts to drop, then we will see. So it's going to be path dependent. That's the eventual goal, but I'm not going to signal it now.
When you mentioned the
那在第二段的内容当中，主持人就问到了 Besant 如何来看美联储的政策导向，因为美联储刚刚公布了上一次议息会议的会议纪要，其中说到了联储是否加息还是降息，是要继续来观察特朗普政府的相关政策的，比如说大规模驱逐非法移民的政策和关税的政策会不会导致这个通胀的继续上升等等。对此 Besant 不愿意直接评价美联储的纪要和政策，但是他又从自己的角度提出了一个疑问。他说，过去这几年，美国进入了1000万、2000万的非法移民，而同时呢，美国又经历了最严重的通货膨胀。那为什么驱逐这2000万人会让美联储觉得是一个通胀的因子呢？对于这个问题呢，我认为 Besant 其实是在搅浑水，因为大规模移民的进入是和拜登政府的政策相关。但其实不是导致通胀的核心原因，只是因为这两者，大规模进入移民和通胀是刚好同时发生了。那移民的驱逐对于美联储和市场造成的这种担忧，其实是对劳动力结构不均衡层面的这个担忧。但是呢 ，Besant 并没有直接去回答这个问题，他只是把两个看上去这个同时发生的问题提了出来。这其实是继续把通胀的问题归结为拜登政府的这个政策的失败吧。所以呢，Besant 基本上是特朗普的嘴替来攻击前任政府。那我们来看第二段的内容。
Fed minutes. Participants indicated yesterday that one of the problems they had was they were waiting for Trump policies to come into place. Do you think that those policies, when you think of tariffs, potentially deportations, immigration, this can be inflationary? Is it going to hold back the Fed from cutting rates?
Well, to the extent that team transitory at the Fed is still has any credibility, I would say that tariffs if they have any price adjustments are the most transitory thing there are. So I don't think that should hold them back very long. And I would point out that depending on what number you want to use, 10, 20 million people who came across the border, we had the worst inflation in 40 years when we added 10 or 20 million people. So I'm not sure why people are saying that it's inflationary to tell them to go home.
So when you look at team transitory, do you think the next move for them would be a cut?
Anne-Marie, I have said publicly that I will talk about what the Fed has done. When I was a market commentator and investor, I would talk about what they should do. Now I will leave it to them, and Chair Powell and I have a weekly breakfast. We saw each other yesterday, and I will convey my thoughts there.
Well, let's talk about what they have done. We can comment on that. You said you're willing to. They cut rates 100 basis points going into the end of last year, and an odd thing happened. Yields at the long end rose, they didn't decline. Do you think Federal Reserve easing contributed to higher long end yields?
Well, Jonathan, I would just say the point of cutting rates is to cut rates. So if they cut rates and rates went up, then there probably was something there. I thought that the rate cut in September, I said it maybe even on your show here, that it was oversized. The market responded, but now we're seeing term premium come back down. So we'll see what happens from here.
Do you think the current rate right now is enough to bring down 10-year yields over time just by virtue of being restrictive?
Again, I'm not going to comment on current policy.
I am curious. You talk about how you do look at the 10-year yield every single day. I love that. I love that you're the top bond salesman in the United States. And I'm wondering, are you expecting it or hoping it to go down from here? Is that necessary to achieve your 3% growth target?
Well, what's necessary are the underlying conditions. So the underlying conditions that we need for yields to come down, for growth to go back up. We've got this affordability crisis in housing. We've got an affordability crisis in the auto payments. So one thing that would be very stimulative, and as Jonathan mentioned earlier, the 10 years come down, or rates have come down every week since Donald Trump's been president. So, if we can continue that for 52 weeks, that'd be great. And it'd be it would be a win for the American people, which at the end of the day, that is our goal. So, if we do what we say we're going to do, if we can rein in the budget deficit, if we have non-inflationary growth, if we bring down energy prices, and, I think, now that I have the numbers on the inside, there was a big contributor to this massive inflation was regulation. I think you said earlier this morning that what if these things cause inflation? As Anne-Marie just said, some of the policies. Well, what really happened under the previous administration was you created a demand shock with government spending, but it was met by supply constraints as there was more regulation. In Trump 1.0, we created a demand shock with tax cuts, and it was met by a supply-side response of less regulation. So, the Biden administration created this inflation that a demand shock and constraining supply is the ultimate recipe for inflation. So,
那在第三段的内容中 ，Besant 主要是围绕了主持人对伊隆马斯克领导的Doge 部门的工作展开的。他表扬了马斯克的工作，认为他们的工作引发了大量的讨论和抨击，就是因为他们的工作动了别人的蛋糕。而他认为正是因为Doge的工作，为美国政府节省了大量的资金，那把节省下来的资金放进美国人民的口袋里，会有利于经济。这个时候主持人就非常的敏锐说，那你说放进美国人的口袋，那不如真的就给美国人寄支票吧。马斯克说可以为每个美国人节省$5000下来，不如就把这$5000发给美国人如何？贝森特在听到这个主持人问的这个问题的时候，他就开始讲美国政府赤字的问题，又反问主持人每个人发钱会导致怎么样的结果。这个其实他的潜台词就是认为这个Doge帮助美国政府省下来的钱是为了减少美国的赤字和 政府的债务负担的，并不是真的要给美国居民们发钱。那如果给美国居民发钱，只会造成通胀和价格的上升。所以大家期待说Doge节省下来的钱会变成支票寄到美国人手里面，你就别想了。这个财政部长已经发话了。第二个问题是非常有意思的，就是有关黄金储备的问题。因为马斯克这2天在社交媒体平台上说要检查美国的黄金储备到底在不在。那针对这个问题，贝森特就说到了，说2020年9月的时候，他们去检查过，没有问题，黄金都老老实实、好好的、整整齐齐的在这个仓库里待着呢。那主持人又问说，现在黄金的价格已经大幅度的上升到了这个$3000一盎司，那你要不要把美国政府的资产负债表上面的这个资产根据黄金的价格来重估一下？因为大家知道，根据会计的原则，如果重估价值的话，那美国政府手中的这个资产的价值会大幅度的上升的。贝森特否认了记者的这一说法，说我不会重估的。那这个美国政府手里的资产还是以盎司来计价，而并不是以美元来计价。那他的讲话是这个非常的有意思的。那我们继续来看第3段视频吧。
And now you want to cut spending. The Doge program, let's talk about it. You've called it one of the most important audits to government ever. You remember that Clinton tried something similar, the National Partnership for Reinventing Government. How different will this be? And what kind of cost savings are you and the team thinking about?
Yeah, and John, I can go all the way back. Given my tenure in the business, I can go all the way back to the 80s to the Grace Commission. And they had some great ideas, most of them not implemented. I think that the Clinton-Gore initiative, I think a lot of that was academics. So this is people on the ground, all areas of government, and it's moving quickly. And I really do think it's unfortunate that it's been lampooned and attacked the way it has. But when it's being attacked like this, it tells me that there are a lot of entrenched interest in terms of, when you're moving people's cheese, they don't like it. And it's not their cheese, it's the American people's cheese.
Well, how about putting some of that cheese back into American people's pockets? How inflationary would those $5,000 potential Doge checks be that the president spoke about yesterday?
Well, I think, again, that if we are bringing down energy prices, if we are cutting the regulation. So I think that it's to quote the vice president during the campaign, I think it's holistic, and I think that it's all kind of one mosaic. If you were to inject a lot of money into the economy, because Anne-Marie, think about this: that we are at this massive deficit to GDP, 6.7, almost 7%. So what will be happening on one side? You'll be bringing down that spending in the economy. So, very easy mental model is every 300 billion is about 1% of GDP. So every 300 billion that Doge is able to save, could you put that back in the economy into people's pockets?
One thing potentially that could happen, and people are questioning it, is maybe remarking gold. Elon Musk, who's leading Doge, was talking about maybe going to Fort Knox to make sure those gold reserves are there. That comes under your purview. Do you have any plans to visit Kentucky?
I don't have any plans. I can tell you that we do an audit every year. I can tell the American people on camera right now that there was a report September 30th, 2024. All the gold is there. Any U.S. senator who wants to come and visit it can arrange a visit through our office.
Gold was your biggest holding when you were hedge fund manager before you divested to become the Treasury Secretary. So you know the value of where gold is right now versus where it's marked on its balance sheet, just north of $40 an ounce. It's close to $3,000. Is it under consideration for this administration to revalue gold?
I think that somehow when we were talking about the sovereign wealth fund and I said monetize the balance sheet, I can promise you that's not what I had in mind.
So it's not under consideration, not on the table?
That's not what I had in mind.
When you look at the Doge savings that you have so far, how much is that going to go to offset some of the tax extensions that we see? What other savings are you looking at that potentially are crucial?
Well, again, they're just getting started. And one of the shocking things to me has been when we talk about waste, fraud, and abuse, we all think of what comes out of D.C., we think of some waste and fraud and friction costs. Because one way to think about this is 25% of the U.S. economy flows through Washington, D.C. So if we can cut the friction on that, that's a lot of savings. We are discovering now, in waste, fraud, and abuse, there may be much more fraud going on than we thought. And I think you're going to be hearing about that over the coming weeks.
Can we hear about it now?
I think you're going to be hearing about it over the coming weeks.
What kind of fraud are you thinking about? What kind of fraud have you identified?
Again, I'd refer you to some.
Well, you're here now, so I want to see some of it out of you.
I'd refer you to some of the statements by Lee Zeldin at the EPA.
Okay.